Kevin, can we argue or confirm that we no longer have a West, but, Lucas, do we have a Europe? So please, Kevin.
First of all, let me thank Dimitra and Costa for the invitation. It's a fantastic festival. 4 years of success. I congratulate you on that. And let me thank the distinguished guests for being here and the very warm words, too generous words being said. Do we have a West? I think there is a fundamental contrast. I have to get used to this microphone. If the discussion doesn't go too well, I'm going to play the piano and sing.
Okay, no problem.
Is that a promise or a threat?
It is a threat, but bear with
Sounds
me.
like a threat.
Bear with me for the moment. I think we have an irony of a contrast. In economics, we still have a West in a very meaningful sense. The US-EU relationship is by far the biggest economic trading relationship in the world. The United States trades with Europe twice as much as it trades with China. The United States and the EU have a flow of investment 16 times, 16 times bigger than the United States has with China. So the relationship is extremely important. And it means, therefore, that the latest tariff wars that we've seen this year are all the more self-defeating. It's a lose-lose situation. But do we have a West as a concept, as a meaningful concept? This is clearly collapsing before our eyes. We can think of the evidence J.D. Vance, as Vice President, speaking at the Munich Security Conference. He himself highlighted that in terms of our beliefs, our basic values, Europe and the United States were moving apart. A famous book some years ago, The Clash of Civilizations, Samuel Huntington. If that book was being written today, where would we draw the borders? Where would we put the division? It seems that the basic logic of the West, is crumbling. These trends, this momentum, predate Trump. They will outlive Trump. But clearly President Trump has given history a huge push forward. And I'm by no means confident that the future American president could restore the same meaning, the same unity to the West as we have lived through in past years.
But, Lucas, as I already asked you, do we have a Europe?
Yeah, first of all, let me congratulate and thank the organizers for a wonderful organization, for the initiative, and thank them for inviting me to be able to take part in this. Now, do we have a West or do we have Europe? The first point I would like to make is that I believe we live through the end of an era. And the end of the era precedes Putin and Trump. It's in fact, there are long-term developments that we've been seeing in terms of geopolitics, geoeconomics, coupled with climate change and other things that are changing the world around us. I would put it even more starkly. What we've been seeing in recent months and years is the world turning upside down, and especially for Europe. Because Europe took for granted, after the fall of the wall in Berlin, that we lived in a peaceful continent with growing economic interdependence, with strong international institutions, common rules, in which Europe benefits because it has open economies, a world in which Europe exerts its soft power. And last but not least, Europeans thought that this is a wonderful world, but if things were ever to turn bad, there would always be an external protector, named the United States, to save them. Now, all this no longer exists because Europe has two wars on its front, on its border. It is facing a more revisionist Russia. It is facing an increasingly unpredictable and unreliable external protector, notably the United States. The United States that sometimes treats Europe more as an enemy than an ally. And a world where the economic order, is collapsing. It is a world increasingly in which the will of the strongest prevails. International institutions no longer have much power, common rules are abandoned, and might becomes right. And if you have any doubts about it, you are constantly reminded of this collapse by Mr. Putin, by Mr. Trump, and if I may say so, by Mr. Netanyahu.
I don't know if you have already
So
answered.
the thing I would
Yes.
add is, this is a new world for which Europe was not prepared for. And we are desperately trying to adjust to this new world. Our response so far is limited. I mean, I had written a book 2.5 years ago in which I said, if Putin does not succeed in unifying Europeans, a re-elected Trump might do. And my conclusion is both of them will have to try much harder by threatening us, by blackmailing us, for Europeans to wake up and unify. So far, the reaction is very limited.
So after 8 months after Trump took the power, how would you both update us in brief, as we say, the journalist entitles the impact, the side effects, and where does Trump inner realism can lead to?
Some say, of course, that Trump doesn't really have a strategy. And I think there's not much depth to the strategy. Lucas has said it's MAGA, it's might is right. But Trump is impulsive. He contradicts himself. There isn't much substance below that. Some suggest that Trump wishes to project himself as being mad. He's doing a pretty good job at the moment. Projecting himself as mad with the intention that his opponents cannot predict what he will do. I'm not sure about that. Some suggest that he's an ally of Putin, a poodle of Putin. I'm not sure about that. But where is the evidence that Trump is willing to face down Putin? Where is the contradictory evidence? It is remarkable that in 2025, serious people raise the question as to whether Trump is some kind of stooge of Moscow. Remarkable. So what does Trump want? I don't think Trump fully knows, and that's the problem. He presents the worst of all worlds to Europe. It's the ambiguity that he gives to Europe. What is the effect of that? It makes Europe self-doubt itself. Europe lacks the confidence. What have we seen in the Atlantic relationship in recent times? We've seen the NATO Secretary General refer to the United States President as daddy. We've seen the British Prime Minister use the King as a second invitation to Trump to come to London. This is humiliating for Europe in terms of its acquiescence. But what it does is actually gives Trump more power. We empower Trump by acquiescing, by pandering, by making concessions to him. What is the Atlantic relationship today? My final point, the Atlantic relationship today is built on uncertainty, lack of trust, and lack of unity. If, as we stand here in CHIOS, if President Erdogan was to create difficulties in the Aegean, if he was to create difficulties in Cyprus, how many of us would be confident that the White House would come to the support of Greece and Cyprus in that situation? Even asking the question tells us how far we have moved. For the United Kingdom, what is the Trump effect? Trump is actually helping the United Kingdom to come closer to Europe again. It's the complete opposite of what Trump had intended. But we have an Atlantic relationship which barely merits the name of relationship. It is fragile, it is unpredictable, it lacks trust, and it lacks commonality of belief and values.
Please.
Okay, I think that more than anything else, unpredictability is the key element of Trump's strategy. It's not madness, it's unpredictability, and it is deliberate, conscious. Through unpredictability, he confuses, especially the allies. One country that doesn't seem to be very confused by Mr. Trump is China. China is facing the United States with countermeasures every time there is a threatening measure from the other side. The rest of the world, what we have done, I mean, especially as far as Europe is concerned, the large majority of Europeans, with the possible exception of President Macron, have resorted to two things: flattery and concessions. But we are gaining time. I'm not sure that this is the right strategy, because by offering concessions, you're not absolutely at all sure that next day, next week, or next month, he will ask for much more. And this is the problem. And it is also true that the spectacle of Europe in the golf court in Scotland, in the NATO summits in The Hague, and at the meeting in the White House is not a spectacle that can inspire younger generations of Europeans. And I'm sorry to say this, but I believe it's a fact of life. I mean, if you go to younger generations and if you talk about Europe and the future of Europe, these images are not forgotten and they're not at all reassuring.
So, how can we make Europe big again, great again? No matter who the boss is, no matter where he comes from, China, Asia, or he's our neighbor, Russia, or he's an Indian, or it's USA. How can we make Europe great again?
Me or Kevin?
Both of you.
This is Lucas.
Please, Lucas.
Okay. How do we make Europe great again? It's like making America great again.
Yes, of course.
Now, what Europe needs at the time when the world is coming upside down is to behave and acquire strategic autonomy, which means you have to reach a situation in which collectively Europeans can define their fundamental interests and values and negotiate accordingly. This is precisely what we are not achieving so far. This is very difficult because we are asking Europe to behave as a geopolitical power. And we are asking, the European Union, but also now with support and in collaboration closer with the United Kingdom. And we are asking Europe also to add security to what has been until now essentially a peace project. Which means, if you want me to put it bluntly, is asking Europe to change its DNA. Because this is not what Europe was made for.
What do you
This
think
is a different one.
about the DNA?
I would love to live in Lucas's Europe. I believe in what Lucas has written about the future of Europe. However, I'm a little skeptical about it. I don't think we are going to see in the near term major changes. A crisis impact is not necessarily something that comes quickly, and history is messy. It doesn't create grand, big designs. We are not going to wake up one morning and find ourselves in the United States of Europe. I think instead, what we have is a Europe which is messy, a jigsaw which doesn't fit, asymmetries in parts, etc. But we should also recognize that Europe has potential. Where would we be today if Europe didn't have the single market, the euro, institutions to build on? There is potential. But is today the time when Europe will make a big leap forward, a big stride forward? I think our domestic societies are very divided, clearly across our politics. Europe depends on that kind of bottom-up support. It's not immediately evident that Europe is looking to create something closer, more united in that respect. Rationally, there is every reason to support what Lucas has just been describing. But I don't think we're going to get there in a linear fashion. I don't think we're going to get there in a simple, straightforward fashion. And Lucas is right that this year we've had a wake-up call. When Europe was challenged, Europe conceded to the United States in a very poor trade deal. Europe didn't act tough like China. Europe hasn't created other trade deals to compensate for Trump's actions. It's the geopolitics where Europe has always been weak, but the surprise of 2025, the shock of 2025, is that even in economics, the one area where the European Union has built so much, in that one area, we've found an illusion. The European Union does not externally use its economic power to achieve what it could do. It could have confronted the high tech of California. It could have insisted on a better trade deal. Incidentally, the Commission started by saying that with the trade deal with the United States, it wouldn't accept a 10% tariff like England had to accept. So instead, we now have a 15% tariff that the European Union accepted with the United States. So it's an illusion that has been shattered, that we have an economic power, but Europe is not currently using it. Should it? Yes.
Can I add one word?
Please do.
I fully share your worries. I mean, I expressed the objective and the ambition, but to be honest, and I've been following as you have, European affairs for a very long time, I've never been so worried about the state of Europe and its prospects. Never. And dare I add something else, sometimes so ashamed. So ashamed.
What are the implications for Greece, Kevin? Is Greece converging enough? Can it deliver the necessary reforms? You are an expert in European, but in Greek affairs too. And to tell our audience here that you're preparing a documentary with the 4 ministers, prime ministers of Greece.
Yeah. What is the basic point? Clearly, EU membership is the biggest challenge for Greece, but also the biggest opportunity. I would venture to argue that serious substantive reform in Greece is far more likely when the European Union acts. Indeed, reform without the European Union often seems to be rather limited. And we need bolder reforms, more confident reforms to take Greece forward. Is Greece converging? Yes. Is it converging enough? No. What's controversial about that? There's nothing controversial about that. Europe is a huge challenge, but the opportunity of Europe reframes the question, reframes politics in ways which I genuinely think are very, very positive for Greece. So, can Greece reform more? Yes. Does it need support to do that from Brussels? Yes. Greece clearly will remain a full, thriving member of the European Union, but to be realistic, it's one of the smaller states on the outer edges of the Union. The future is Europe, but it is a critical test. There are too many no-go areas for reform in Greece. Europe, I think, is a stimulus to domestic reform.
Okay, let me add 2 words about foreign policy, because that's the other important element. I mean, we all know, in CHIOS you know it even more than the rest of Greece knows, that we live in a difficult neighborhood. And this is the understatement of the year. All right? It's a difficult neighborhood. Greece has invested a lot in its European relationship, in a strategic relationship with the United States, and among other things also in developing a strategic relationship with Israel in recent years. What has been happening throughout the last few months, if not a year, is that one of those strategic relationships, the most important with the United States, raises a fundamental question about predictability and reliability. We just don't know. We no longer know how predictable can be US support. And the other strategic relationship with Israel has become, if I may put it bluntly, increasingly embarrassing.
Και να κλείσουμε με μια ερώτηση για τους πολέμους. Our peaceful world has fallen apart. The last 2 years we have the war in Ukraine, we have the war in Israel and Palestine, but please allow me to focus on the second one. I'm unable to understand as an international and European affairs journalist, as well as a human being, what on earth is happening? How can we accept this genocide in progress?
Lucas is absolutely right. These things are embarrassing, humiliating, in terms of the values that Europe stands for. It's a contradiction of our very self. Why are we acquiescent? Too many European governments wish to avoid upsetting Trump because of potential knock-on effects. Recognizing the state of Palestine by France and the United Kingdom in the coming weeks is an important step forward, but it's still very limited. And we seem to be afraid of going further because we don't know whether Trump would tolerate it and whether Trump would take other steps to damage the Atlantic relationship, etc. So, final point, we have grown up with Europe as a system of values, standing for certain norms and beliefs and principles. As Lucas has said, and as Irini has suggested also, Gaza, let alone Ukraine, really question what is Europe for? And Lucas makes a very, very good point about future generations of Europeans. What are they witnessing as they become political adults? What do they take forward in future years? He's right. These things are belittling Europe.
Okay, we as already mentioned, two wars in our immediate neighborhood. One in Ukraine, the other in Gaza, Palestine, Middle East in general. Europe rightly condemned Russia's invasion. It has condemned crimes. It has imposed sanctions on Russia. And it has applied double standards in the two wars. Because what we do vis-à-vis Russia, we avoid doing vis-à-vis Israel. Now, those double standards are not only awkward for those of us Europeans who are watching what is happening, but those double standards are very well seen and understood by the rest of the world. And Europe is being increasingly accused of double standards and hypocrisy in its foreign policy. And this is what I meant before when I said I feel sometimes ashamed.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Thank you.
Σας παρακαλώ, θέλετε να κάνετε αυτό. Please join us here. Thank you.
Thank you. Έχουμε κοντά